Voila. So I hope you are doing great and that the summer is going very well for you and that you will be able to enjoy the week of sun in Belgium that is planned, that forecasted. Thanks for joining today. Let's jump immediately to the intro and the agenda for today. So as usual, we have a small welcome and clarification on the objectives. We'll go through quickly the process that we use, the input that we received, and the timeline foreseen, and where we are exactly in the process of building the public service and public organization models. And then we'll really dive into the content by presenting you first with the public organization model that has been published and the changes that have been made since our last webinar. And we'll do the same also for the public service model. And then we'll also have some interactive sessions for each model for really identifying change requests for each that you will think about and you will brainstorm in breakout rooms. And then, of course, we will wrap up in a small at the end of the webinar. Yeah, as usual, if you don't talk, don't want to share something with the rest of the group, please mute yourself. But of course, don't refrain yourself also from participating and collaborating in this webinar. You can raise your hand at the bottom of your screen. Normally, you have a small hand on which you can click if you want to speak. And you can, of course, also raise questions in the chat. And you will see that during the meeting, during the webinar, we will also ask you some questions, and feel free to agree or disagree with those with a +1 or -1. Nothing new, you know about this. We've been using the same for the past webinars. Now, as mentioned briefly, today is about presenting you with the changes to the two models, and then really discussing, okay, what further changes do we need to bring into the models? For example, are there specific code lists that we need to use, or since we started from European models as inspiration, are there attributes, information that we need to make more specific for Belgium? Yeah, those are the types of questions that we will have for you, and then we'll discuss all that together and plan for the next iteration by beginning of September in the next webinar on the 9th. And as a small reminder, as you know, what we are trying to do here is really to develop two specifications, so two clear descriptions of a set of information about public service and public organization. And the idea is to involve you as domain experts from different administrations, different domains in Belgium, in order to agree on this. Yeah, so CPSVAP and CPOV, so the core public service vocabulary and the core public organization vocabulary, were the two models used as baseline from European level. And during the first workshop 0, which was more about explaining the idea of this process and this approach to a large group of business people, so that's what we did in workshop 0, and as part of that, we also started mapping this to existing models within Belgium, such as Nostra and Oslo. And during the first workshop, what we did, if you remember, is, or if you had the opportunity to participate, was actually to prepare a first proposition from with a diagram of class. And based on that, we started discussing, okay, what should be included, what is the scope of each model. And the main outcome of the first webinar was simply to say that what we are trying to achieve with the public service and public organization models here is to define information really for information purpose For example, I will clarify this. The idea is to describe information, for example, on the website, or to be able to collect and gather information for building a catalog of public organization or a catalog of public services. But the idea is not yet to make those models at operational level, meaning to specify the model to a detail level or granular level in order to describe one specific public service and to deliver it. If there are questions about this, don't hesitate to write them down in the chat or to raise your hand, because I think it's important that we are all aligned on this. Otherwise, I continue. And after the first workshop, what we did is use a tool chain that was built by Oslo in order to automatically describe online and create different formats of the specification. That's what we shared with you. So there were two links, one for each public service and public organization. And to give you an idea, let me show you. This is what we are talking about. So that's what we created as a specification of public organization. And that's what I'm showing right here. It includes, this is another example from European level, but it includes actually a description of the context, a visual representation of the model, and then different tables. I'll show you, so the visual representation on which you can click to zoom on it. And then for each element, a table with some information. You see that we didn't include descriptions and usage nodes for each information yet, but the idea is by the end of this process, this methodology, to have everything described and agreed upon. For example, for address here, we have the description, which is kind of the definition, the usage, and then for each attribute of this class, we have different information. Quick glance at the process and methodology defined by ICEG. So last time in the previous webinar, we created an initial draft, step 3. Here we are really within the iterative part of the process where we elaborate interim draft specifications, and then we go back to you as the working group. And based on discussions, we iterate and improve the different specifications based on your comments. So that's really where we are right now. And with that, today I have also some colleagues who will also help and describe certain parts for public organization, public service models, so that you don't have to listen to me for 2 hours. And with that, I would like to give the room to Christophe, who will guide you through the public organization model. Christophe?
Yeah, thanks, Florian. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Great. I'll try to. Okay, do you want to present or do I take over of the screen?
Yeah, I can keep it.
Okay, great. Yeah, first, maybe on the approach, as Florian said in the introduction, we have foreseen some breakout sessions. So the idea is that the bulk of the discussion is going to be during the breakout sessions, but nevertheless, if you have important questions, you can still raise them as for the understanding of the model or other stuff that you want to clarify. So on the screen, you will see basically the updated version of public organization. So it's not the version that we've published with the toolchain. We've made other additional changes, but we'll publish the updated version as soon as this webinar is over. The changes come from the last webinar. So as Florian mentioned, we've published a report on the GitHub, which contains the discussion points and also changes that you formulated that we've implemented in the model. but also GitHub issues. So many of you published different issues on GitHub, and thanks for that. And we've tried to take them into account to the extent possible in the two models that we're presenting to you today. So first of all, for the changes regarding a public organization, so we have had the question as for what is the difference between a suborganization and an organizational unit. And so that one, we didn't make any change, but it's clarified in the specification that you can access online in the fact that an organizational unit is basically can be seen as a department of the organization, while the other is really an organization itself. That's it. So that was the first input that we received. We also had the request to describe people and their role within an organization. And as you can see on the screen, on the right-hand side, you have a core person class. On the model online, it's the agent, but we replace it with the person from the core vocabulary person, and we have all the person attributes. It's for you to decide whether we need all of them or we need only a subset of them. And to that, as it was requested to add the roles, we also added the qualification to describe the role of the person within the organization. And next to that, we added a relationship to organization. As you can see, there is member of or as member, which is unbounded because you can have a multitude of members of an organization. We also had the request to make an unbounded relationship between public organization and suborganizations. So that you can see in the middle of the screen. It's the circular relationship between public organization. And a quick note on that, we started from core vocabularies at the European level, and the rule with core vocabularies is that we don't have any cardinality. And well, the purpose of this workshop is for you to determine what are the cardinalities of the different attributes and relationships. So it's important that during the discussion and during the follow-up discussion and the next webinars, we try to determine what attributes are optional, mandatory, and whether it's needed to have them unbounded or bounded. Voilà, that's important. A next change was the fact that, well, we received the comment, the rightful comment that the spelling of organization was not always consistent, and we opted, as it was pointed to us, for a American English, so with the Z in organization. Other comments that we received were the fact that well, there was a question whether organization is itself a member of public organization, but I think it's the other way around. As you can see on the visual here, the diagram here, we have a public organization, which is a child class of the organization, and it's the same for organizational unit. These are both child classes, and then they inherit from the attributes of organization, which are a description and identifier. So jumping to identifier, then we tried to harmonize all expected range from the identifier attribute. We received the comment, and well, we started from European models, and it's also a topic that is discussed at European level. What could be the expected type of identifier? Previously in the model, we had either literal or text, and here we simply harmonized to identifier, so the class. As you can see on the top of the screen, it's circled in blue, and there, whenever you have an identifier, we point to this class. It's to be discussed within this working group whether it makes sense to have all attributes for an identifier, so the date of issue, the scheme URI, the scheme name, etc., or if it's just if the identifier itself is enough. And on the same topic, we also received the comment that there's a need to add the KBO number, numéro BCE, to an organization, and that can be fulfilled with the identifier class. We also made some small editorial changes as for the spelling and writing of terms. I don't need to go through them, but if you spot any of these, you can still raise them to us, and we'll address them. And it's a change that was also added in one of the previous webinars, but for which we would need your input, is the type for public organization. So it would be good if we could try to coin a definition for that term. So voila, that's for in a nutshell the changes that were brought to the public organization model. And on the next slide, if you can move to that, Florian, you have basically an overview of all the changes that I just explained for you to keep track of them for the discussion that we have foreseen in a couple of slides. And voila. With that being said, we have also, similarly to the previous workshop, so we elaborate on the change that were made to the model, and next to that we propose a use case to try to make well, a lifelike example out of the model, so that it's more tangible for us to discuss in the coming slides. So voila, maybe Florio, if you can also move to the next slide, thanks. And voila, so the use case here for public organization is about capturing common information whenever they are funded. I know that, well, when we talk about use cases for public organization, it's essential that you also provide your use cases. They are not unlimited. I think we can agree on the fact that whenever you have an organization, you can describe when there's a fusion, a split, a creation, decommissioning of an organization, etc. And today we picked the foundation to illustrate the use case of public organization. So it's very simple in the context of a public organization. It's always initiated, created, set up thanks to a legal agreement. And so following that agreement, there's a creation process where we need to capture the different data. So the creation event, and it's described by some attributes such as description, started at type, and type. So in between brackets, what you see underlined are the attributes to which we refer in the public organization model. But we'll dive into each of the paragraph here in a separate slide with illustration of the different attributes and classes to make it as tangible as possible. So now the second step, when you've, well, the creation event is well, quote unquote, the creation event is there. You have to provide a name to your public organization, and for that we have different attributes such as alternative label and preferred label. Preferred label is basically the legal name, and alternative label is the common name that people use when they refer to the organization. Then obviously you add a description of the organization, a type, which is to be discussed, what can be the type of an organization. And then for the people to come to your organization, you need to find premises and to have a physical location for that public organization, which is captured by the address attribute, address class, and then address attributes. So you've given basic information about the organization, but it's also, as all public organization, they have a mandate, and with that mandate comes a coverage, if I may say. So basically, your public organization is going to administer a certain territory, and voila, it's captured thanks to administrative territorial units. So beyond being physically accessible, you also need to be reachable via phone, via email. You also need to give specifications about the opening hours, etc. All of these are captured in the public organization model. We have different classes for that. And then lastly, and I think it's one of the important elements to discuss today also, as there were some misunderstanding last time as for the different classes around the organization. Your organization can be structured in organizational units. So it's really departments. So within an organization, you have different departments, and these departments are captured thanks to the organizational unit class. Within that organization, you also have employees. So we have for that foreseen the person class, and for the different employees, you can have roles and responsibilities which are captured by the qualification attribute, which is yet to be defined on the specification, but there you can provide the role of the person. And then one last thing, it can be that, well, you create a standalone public organization, or that public organization is part of another public organization. And then there's the concept of suborganizations, which, well, might be difficult to understand at first glance, but it's really straightforward. And we've provided with some usage notes and definition on the specification as for what is a suborganization and what is an organizational unit. And well, in the Belgian context, if it's not clear enough, there's still the possibility to enrich these descriptions and usage notes, and that's for you to, well, to comment to us whether you'd like to see improved definitions. So that's for the use case. And now if we can dive into the different parts of the model. On the next slide, you can see basically what we've said at the beginning. So you have a change event, which is basically the foundation of the public organization. And there we have a description of the event. So it's for this example, we've picked the Walloon Export Agency. And so for that, we described that we created. The change event also captured the start time, so the foundation date. As you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, the type is obvious. It's a foundation. It has a relationship to a legal resource. So it's a decree, which is published to the Belgisch Stadblad, the Moniteur Belge. And there, the legal resource has a name and points to an identifier. And then as we made the change and we tried to generalize the approach towards identifier, you can see on the right-hand side of the screen that you have common attributes for identifier, and it's for you to decide whether you want to capture them all or if we want to set some as optional. But you can see that we have the date of issue, which is the creation of basically the decree, the identifier, which comes from the Belgische Staatsblad, then the issuing authority name, issuing authority URI, which is not there in the example, but which is to be provided, the scheme name, and the scheme URI. So that are all the elements that are captured within the identifier class. And then next to that, we have the change event, which is the foundation, which is there because of a decree, and it results in a public organization. So as you can see on the bottom of the screen, we have the public organization. And as I said earlier, we have an alternative label and a preferred label. And then we have a type to define. This class inherits from the parent class, which is organization. And there we have the attribute, basically description, in which we describe the organization itself. We also have another attribute, which is an identifier. And there it points to the right-hand side of the screen at the bottom. And you can see it's similar to the legal resource. We have a date of issue, an identifier, issuing authority name, issuing authority URI, and there we have the KBO number, the numéro BCE, that is captured in that identifier, and that was one of the comments that we received on the GitHub, which was basically to have the possibility to capture these numbers. And it's there in the identifier. As you can see, we have the this number with the date dash and then the creation date. So that's for the first part of your creation of a public organization, and we have all these information captured in the model.
Maybe, Christophe, are there any questions at this stage? Is everything clear? We are not saying that you cannot have also comments about the content itself. Huh? That's exactly why we put it on paper, so that we have a basis for discussion.
But yeah, if you don't have any question now, that's fine. We have a placeholder for discussion, and I assume that you may have some at a later moment. But yeah, okay.
I see a question in the chat and also Mark raising his hand. So Anne is saying, how about historical data, former addresses, and so on? Are they captured here? I think as part of the foundation event, if I answer directly, the idea is that there is no former address, but maybe I'm understanding this wrongly. But it's really the first point in time where the public organization is created. But of course, not for the foundation, but in general. Okay, but I think yes, that's something we said previously, that we should be able to capture historical changes. But that's more, I think, from a technical perspective to know, okay, how could we do that when implementing the model of capturing the different logs of changes between and that's something I know is being discussed at European level. But so far, we are not looking into it immediately. So if you have specific propositions for that, don't hesitate.
And maybe, Mark, you wanted to say something?
Yes. Why did you, on that schema here, put a link between public organization and organization? What's the purpose of that?
It's not a link. I mean, we try to differentiate the different arrows. Well, it's part of, as I explained in the model. I don't know, Florian, if you can maybe switch back to the model. It's a child class. So I don't know if it answers your question, but it's not necessarily a link.
It's type of link, let's say, but and the idea is simply that a public organization is an organization.
Yeah, voilà.
You can have other types of organizations, and here we really focus on public organization, but without forgetting the fact that there are external models from W3C or other organizations that are actually, or organisms that are defining in detail the organization itself with specific classes and properties. And the idea is to be able to link to it and to reuse what exists already. And that's why we made this this connection clear through subclass.
In fact, so you could also define models like for commercial organizations that are inheriting from organization then.
Exactly.
Indeed.
And without being in contradiction with what we define here, because here we really focus on public organization, but let's imagine that a private organization has also a foundation event. We could imagine that then we discuss the fact that the change events could be directly connected to the organization class and not to the public organization class. So if you see that it's elements that are common could actually be put at the organization class level, so that you don't have to define them several times.
Okay, thanks.
And yeah, if there are no more questions, then let's resume let's resume the example. Okay, I see that you are already on the correct slide. Thanks. And so voilà, next to the foundation event and the setting up of the organization, we have additional attributes. And in the example that I gave, there is basic data about the organization, which was already covered in the previous slide, such as alternative label, preferred label, the description of the organization, etc. But we saw in the example that there is a need for a physical address, for contact points, etc. And these are all captured by the classes that you can see on screen. So for the address, we refer to the core location vocabulary, and then there is the address class. It's also for you to decide what elements you want to capture from that class. It's not an exhaustive list in here on screen. There is only 5 of them. So there is the address area, which is Brussels, the postcode 1080, and then the full address of the organization, of the public organization, for the headquarters here, and then we have admin unit level 1 and admin unit level 2. Sorry, and it's captured here. For the contact points, it's pretty straightforward. We have the opening hours, we have the telephone number, and we have the email. And there is also an additional class which is not captured here in the example, but which is opening hour specification. But well, for the sake of the example, it's not necessary. And then here, as I said in the intro, the organization has a mandate and a spatial coverage, which is captured with the administrative territorial units. And there we have 2 links to the codes that are used at Belgian level in French and Dutch.
I think in general here we want also to discuss with you which codes we should use for the administrative territorial units class, but also in general within the address for the admin unit level 1, admin unit level 2. We propose something coming from code list maintained by the Publications Office of the European Union. But of course, it's up for discussion to say, okay, this is actually fine, or we should also have maybe more detailed code lists, or we are actually using today other code lists that would be relevant here.
Indeed. Thanks for the addition, Florian. And voilà, that's something we can discuss in the breakout sessions. And then we have a last slide for the example, which is basically about the structure of the organization itself. And as we said, if we start from the left-hand side of the slide, we have the public organization that was created. Which is the Walloon Export Agency, and then that organization has organizational units. There's only one here on the screen, but you can see it's on the top of the screen, and we have regional centers. and it's basically sort of a department of the public organization, and there it's captured in the model. They both point to the organization class, which is the parent class, and there again it's recurring. We have the description of the organization. Normally, I think there's just a mistake here. The preferred label should not be in this class, but that's for you to know. And then on the bottom of the screen, for the sake of the example, we said that it can be the Walloon Export Agency can be yeah. Bernard, you want to interject?
Hello, everybody. I will let you finish your sentence. I didn't want to interrupt, but I have a couple questions on this slide.
Okay, sure. Then I'll finish the explanation, and then we can have a discussion on that one. And then, for the sake of the example, we can say that this public organization is part of a has another. It's the other way around. Sorry. And then that the Walloon Export Agency has a sub-organization, which is here Wallonie-Bruxelles Architecture, and voilà, it is also linked to the organization class, which captures the description of the agency. So I hope that it's clear, but just in a nutshell, on the left-hand side on the screen, we have the public organization, which was created, and then it has units, so different regional centers across its territorial coverage, and then it also has sub-organizations, so which specialize in different, maybe which has a specific mandate. And then voilà, the right-hand side of the slide is about the member of the organization, and there we refer to the person class, and then we have all the attributes related to the person that are fulfilled with the birth name, the family name, the given name, etc. It's again for you to discuss which one you want to keep, and then we have the qualification. So it's the role of the person within the organization, and we illustrate it with two different persons, as you can see on the screen. We have an administratrice générale and then a regional manager, who are both member of the organization. Voilà, that's for the example. And now, Bernard, you have the floor for your questions and remarks.
Thank you. Actually, I find this slide a little bit confusing.
Okay.
I take for example the top the uppermost arrow between organizational unit and organization. As I understand, a box for organization is intended to host the core attributes of an organization, of which public organization or organizational units depend.
Mm-hmm.
So that would mean that the organizational unit that is represented here, the Centre Régional de Liège, could have its own set of organization attributes, which would not be the same as the public organization. Am I correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And another question is more general that I have from a few slides before, is what is the depth of possible organizational units? Because here it's a very simple example, but you could have, units of units of units. Is it possible in the model? And it also relates to another interrogation that I have, is do we really need the organizational unit concept? And can it be addressed with the public organization and sub-organization concept? And if not, what is the difference between the two? What is the differentiation criteria to use organizational unit or sub-organization to describe, children of a main organization?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Florian. I'll start with a couple of answers. So, as maybe if we can, to illustrate here my answer, Florian, move back to the model, and that relates to your first question, which was about having different levels of organizational unit. I don't think that's foreseen in this model. As you can see, you can have multiple organizational units, but they will all depend on the organization. But you cannot go on one level down. It's not foreseen in the model as it is now. But again, we have to determine whether it's necessary and whether we want to capture that in the model. That is to be seen. And then for the second part of your question, which was the difference between organizational unit and public organization, right? Or did I understood it differently? Okay. And then, as I said in the beginning, and I think it's captured in the description and the usage notes, but we can try to enrich that. The organizational unit is really a department that or is support unit, which is part of the public organization, while a public organization itself is really a standalone entity.
Yeah, I think the important, Christophe, if I may add,
Yeah.
the important difference is in the fact that an organization or public organization is a legal entity, while the organizational unit will not be considered as a legal entity.
Yeah.
Okay,
Indeed.
so if I understand correctly, so we would need sub-levels of organizational units. I take, for example, the Service Public de Wallonie. We have 3 levels of units, direction générale, département, direction. And for the Ministry of the French community, we have 4. We have one more. So if we are not able to describe that depth in the model, it is a problem.
Yeah. So, okay, if I understand correctly, coming back to this, right now we can go quite deep with this subclass, but only with then legal entities, with the self-relationship sub-organization of. While we don't have this captured at organizational unit level, so maybe we would need a self-relationship here that says that an organizational unit can have sub-organizational units under it. Is that correct?
Yes. And also, that would also apply to certain detailed information, such as contact points, for example, addresses. I think, I don't know if, yes, addresses, I don't see where it is. Well, if it's not related to organizational units, and we have to, for example, differentiate addresses for different organizational units, we need to have some container for that too. If I am correct here, you only define an address for the public organization, which might be a problem. For example, and even in the example of AWEX that you gave, each unit can have its own set of address or contact points.
Yeah. Yeah, and maybe from that perspective, it would make sense to have the connection between address and public organization moved to address and organization.
Yes. And also contact point, I would say.
Yeah. Okay. I think those are relevant points, and I think it's important also to mention that at European level, the model describing public organization is being refined, revised at the moment. So for a couple of months from now. And such discussions are also happening over there. So I think we will try as much as possible first to answer your needs and to align with what they will adopt over there. But I think we will also bring your points to them so that we can make sure that your needs are also captured over there. I think that's...
I have another remark, if I
Yeah.
can keep the floor for a few more minutes or seconds. I still have that interrogation about contact points and unique contact points, and I think Anne just made also the remark for in the chat about the fact that you can have multi-channel contact points for different purposes also, and maybe a solution could be to address the model with the same concept as we use for public service with channel that could maybe be useful, but or it depends on the purpose, of course. If you use take the use case of you know, communicating with the general public about the organization, well, it's important to have all you need to inform of the different channels of contact and what is the preferred way of contacting for what purpose. If it's only a description for administrative purpose and for a kind of registry of public organizations, we might not need such a granularity. Maybe the legal address could be enough, but I doubt it. Well, okay.
And yeah, thanks for that. I think it's also related to the point of Anne in the chat. The fact that within KBR there are different types of addresses, such as the official address, the delivery address, the public entrance for individuals or other companies, and how do we deal with that? And you also say that they all belong to your main building, because I remember similar discussions at urban level where we say, for example, in the org vocabulary, they describe it or they tackle this through the site information site concept, where they say an organization can have multiple sites and each site can have one address, one contact point, etc., etc. My question is, would site answer the need here if all the different addresses are actually in the same building? I don't know, Anne, do you want to react on this? Or I see also that Mark raised hand. Yeah. Voilà, okay. Site won't do the job indeed, because it's the same site. Okay, but so it's something to consider. And if you know of propositions, feel free to also include it on GitHub. We can open a discussion about this. And with that, I don't know, Mark, if you want to add something.
Yes, yes. I know that the topic here is public organization, but I think it would be also interesting to have a look at the model of KBO, where they have in fact commercial organization or private organization together with public organizations, and it would be interesting to see what is now exactly specific for public organizations in this model, because I think a lot of the concepts that we see here could be generalized and are valid as well for private organizations, and it could be interesting to check what is now exactly the differentiating factor between public organization and a private organization.
Yes, I think you are completely right, and I think our proposition here would be to wait for a couple of weeks to the discussions happening at urban level, because they are actually tackling exactly this. In the last webinar at urban level, they say, okay, we need to make all common elements for all types of organizations at organizational level and not within public organization. So they are making the analysis at European level. From the output, I propose to see if it answers our needs, and if it's aligned, then we can directly reuse it. That's one proposition. And Geert, I can give you the floor. And just to say, I propose also that right after we move to the breakout rooms, where we actually will discuss in smaller groups this model, and then come back with all the elements so that we can target them with the entire group of participants. But yeah, Christophe will come to that in a minute. Go ahead, Geert.
I would add some comments to the last person on the whole of the model. I see a few very. Can you please keep the model on the screen? Yeah, thank you. I see a few very specific and in my viewpoint, severe weaknesses. What you're actually discussing with a public organization is nothing else than a specific classification type of an organization. So your core model should be completely focused on all the concepts of the organization. For instance, what are you going to do with a public-private organization in this model? Are you going to build a complete different model for a public-private organization? Then you get a multitude of models where actually it is a classification of a thing. So some of the things, one of the elements that I'm entirely missing here is the difference between the real ontological level, and I mean ontological level on the things in reality. The organization is a thing in reality. Organizations can have sub-organizations, and because of an organization is organized like that, the concept of an org unit has no sense at all. The moment you get a hierarchy, or you build a hierarchy, and you can build hierarchies on different levels. So you have the pure ontological hierarchy of organization, that means is part of. So mereological concepts of things are completely missing in the model. And that is an important guidance on how to design such a model. So in such a case, you'll have an organization with sub-organizations. The relation, they can have several relationships, whether they're a legal entity or not a legal entity. That's a completely different discussion. If they're part of an organization, it's a mereological relationship. Whether it's a public organization or not a public organization, that is a qualification of the organization. So the basic ontological concepts, the basic things, what are classifications, what are not classifications, and the other element, the basic relationships and the classifications of relationships. This is actually the upper level of the modeling you need to build these kind of things. And in my viewpoint, in the whole exercise, this is really missing. And that's why you get into these loops of all kinds of classes with all kinds of relationships. I'll give another example. The concept as an address. If you define the concept as an address at a location, whether it's a physical location on Earth or whether it's an IP address, it really doesn't matter. It is a place where you can reach someone or you can reach an organization. By defining address like that, you'll see that then afterwards you get classifications of address types. An email address, a telephone number, these are addresses linked to specific physical technology. A local, a postal address is exactly the same thing. It's the place where you reach someone. So the definitions at that level are absent. And then you get a very complex models. And it's very difficult to go back every time to the core element of it. So contact point, for instance, that's a perfect example of a mixing up of concepts. Although contact point is very interesting because it groups a series of address possibilities for a specific use, for the general public, or for if you have secret addresses for other purposes. But the mere object types at ontological level and their mereology, that is the basis of these kinds of models. So you're actually modeling at a deeper level without taking into account the real higher levels. And that is the fundamental problem of all the modeling at a European level also for the moment. So either you continue like this, and you will not satisfy, it will not a very satisfactory result. Either you start on top of that, and maybe not in this discussion, but as a result of this, you start the discussions to build the basic ontologies. And then a lot of these discussions will be much, much, much more clear. The whole construction with public organization and any subunits and organization and organizational unit, it's all redundant. And it's redundant because you don't have a clear view on the object itself, their relationships and their classifications. That's the big problem that I have with this kind of modeling, and I see it happening at the level of Oslo also. It's exactly the same thing. I see it happening at ISA, and it's exactly the same thing. So we really need to get over this in order to build long-term sustainable models that you then, for specific application levels, you derive what you need at that level. So that's my general comment.
Yep. Thanks for that. But I propose let's discuss that in the specific rooms, and then come back together with clear propositions or points to be discussed. But I noted down your different points, Geert. So let's not forget about them, and let's tackle them. But first in the breakouts, so that we can really deep dive in specific discussions and come forward to the entire group with already a bit more major propositions, not only for related to this, but in general to all elements, and to give the floor to more people, because I see quite some comments. So my proposition will be to move to the breakout now. Christophe, can you go ahead with the explanation?
Yeah, sure. No, and thanks for the comment, Geert. I think voilà, that's typically one type of comment that we want to be discussed in the breakout rooms, in the sense that we want to brainstorm on that and see what solutions could we bring to the table to improve the models. And so voilà, that's why today we have foreseen some breakout sessions, breakout rooms. So the idea is that we do that for public organization and public services as well. The sequence will be the same, but first we do that for public organization only. And there, what we'll do is we will split the audience in different breakout rooms. Sorry, so ideally 5-6 persons per breakout room to foster a discussion. So you will be allocated automatically, and then as a support to each breakout room, we have the mural board, which is basically similar to last time, and I'm going to put the link in the chat, and I'm going to as soon as I'm finished with the high-level instructions, I'm going to show you the mural board and how you can use it for your discussions. But basically, yeah, the approach is that we, as you've seen on the preceding slides, we have foreseen 30 minutes for that exercise, and it's going to be done in 2 parts. So the first part is about you discussing the different issues at hand. So the one about the modeling approach that we've chosen here and that was discussed by Geert, or the issue about the sites and the addresses, etc. And during 15 minutes, you discuss them and you try to see whether we can already bring solutions or whether it needs further discussion with the whole group. So in the breakout, in the mural, we've also put the change log, so the changes that we've brought to the models, but also, thanks for sharing, Florian, but also the GitHub issues that we have received. We also pasted the rules of the breakout session and a copy of the model that you can see if you scroll further down. You also have a link to the specification, so you just copy paste that in your URL bar, and then it will redirect you to the specification with the descriptions, cardinalities, and usage notes of the different entities and attributes. And on the left-hand side, for each breakout room that we will create, you have a box in which you can put post-its for the discussions and to report in the main room when we are done with the breakout rooms. So as I said, it's 15 minutes. It's a 15-minute exercise, and so it will be ideal if per breakout room you can designate a moderator and rapporteurs just to have a sort of dynamic. So the moderator will simply be the facilitator and giving the floor to everybody and ensuring that everybody contributes to the discussion, and then the rapporteur maybe can take stock of the discussion points and the resolutions in the mural, and then all together, once the 15 minutes have elapsed, we'll be back in the main room, and we will discuss all the conclusions that you've come to. So that's, and maybe if you can move to the next slide, we've also put in written some discussion points that you can cover during the breakout sessions, such as, okay, do we have different use cases? Sorry. With the different use cases, do I have all the information that I need in the model? Are there superfluous entities and attributes? What about the cardinalities? As I mentioned in the beginning, we're starting to propose cardinalities for the different attributes and classes, but not all of them have a specific cardinality. So it would be good to try to look at that. Also, it's linked to, well, basically the discussion we had with organizational units and then public organization and organization. Are the definition clear enough? And it's something to look into. And lastly, a couple of points for you to know. The chats in the breakout rooms are not saved. So if you discuss something in the chat, we'll not be able to see it afterwards. If you have a question or an issue, you can still go back to this main room, or you have also a nice feature which is ask for help that you'll see whenever you are allocated to a room, that you can just press. It's a button, and then one of us can join the meeting room and help you out. And voila, and I think that's it. Florian, I don't know if I missed a point. I hope that's clear.
No, I don't think. I think we can start. I will open the rooms.
And maybe I'll just put the link to the, something.
Yeah, start maybe with Mural. Put the link to Mural in the chat. Let's everyone join Mural, and then let's open the rooms. Well, you have the link in the chat. You can enter the room. It's at the bottom of the page. You can also use the outline on the right side to go to the right place.
Florian, have you set up the breakout rooms?
Yeah. Still see a couple of people. Voila. Okay.
Still have 3 persons in the main room to allocate.
In any case,
Can you allocate them, Florian?
they were already allocated. Yep. Okay. Can each of us join one room? I made 3 of them.
Yeah, sure.
Can we?
I
How
don't
do you
think we can.
Or I can make you join a room, huh? Yeah, I will do that. So, okay, come on. Louis, you join Breakout 2. Christoph, Breakout 3.
Mhm.
If I'm able to. Voilà. Save. Voilà. Thanks for joining back, everyone. Let me share my screen again. Okay, I know it was short, or at least in breakout room 1, it was rather short. But let's tackle briefly the different points you wrote down. Should we start with breakout 3 so that we don't do it always in numerical order? Can someone explain briefly the points, the change request you discussed and you would like to discuss with the entire group? Who was in breakout 3 and who can explain briefly the post-its, the sticky notes?
I know that Mark was in the third breakout room, but I don't see him in the attendees list. You also had Olivier Pascal, if I'm not mistaken.
Mark is still writing on the...
Okay.
Yeah, he's coming.
Let's start then with another group.
Yeah.
So group 2, I don't know, can someone explain briefly to the rest of the group the points?
So in group 2, there were Alvin, Bernard, Hilde. Can one of you can explain briefly what was talked during the breakout room?
I can do it if no one else.
Thank you.
Well, it was really short. I shared the impression. Was it really 15 minutes? We challenged the way the organization is structured. We challenged also the distinction between private and public, because there's really not much that differentiates both on a semantic level. So the question is rather legal than semantic. And we also tried to address the question of whether or not a public organization needs other attributes than the ones that are already contained in organization model. But we didn't really reach a conclusion.
Okay, good. I think, yeah, we can make the link also with what room 1 discussed, but we will come to that in a second. I understand, Bernard, that an important point is actually when we try to say, okay, what's common between private and public organizations and what's specific for public organizations, it comes back to, in the end, trying to define the scope of public organization. And I know right now in the model, it is using frameworks, directives, etc., from European level, but that's maybe also too broad for this model, because maybe we should specify and make the link towards Belgian law or so. But I do think, and let me know if you disagree with that, that we need some background, some framework that is coming from the legal side. So we should, at a certain point, be able to say a public organization covers, for example, a legal entity under public law. And then, of course, there are different types of public organizations under that. But I think we need to have such a scope to make clear what we are talking about when we say public organization.
I think the distinction is very hard to make. You now have public organization they have all the attributes of a private entity with shareholders and everything. So it's very hard to differentiate the two. maybe the key is the fact that they have indeed a foundation act emanating from an authority, but it's not. I'm not even sure that it's always the case. Probably, but I haven't checked.
And so, what would you propose, or? Yeah.
We just addressed the fact that differentiating between a private form and a public form, it's not very semantically relevant. You can have a public organization that could have many forms, and from those forms derive attributes. But those attributes won't define whether it's a public or a legal entity. I don't know if I'm very clear. I'm sorry, but we didn't really go that far in the discussion in the breakout room.
Yeah. Other reactions related to that?
Yeah, in breakout room 1, we had actually, that was a main discussion topic. What is distinctive for public organization compared to an organization? So following on the remark Geert made, we kept talking about that, and I think apart from the legal resource, I don't really, and the fact that for a public organization, you always, of course, have to mention the administrative territorial unit. And then we were wondering which codes to use. So it's mainly that was the main topic of discussion in our case.
Yeah, so the fact that only legal resource, so the kind of formal framework is similar, is the only thing that is specific to public organization is what came out mainly from room 1. Does everyone agree with that? You can also type it in the chat if you agree with a +1 or -1. And of course, the corollary or the related statement is that everything else is actually not specific to public organization but can be defined under organization. Okay, I see some +1s. Thank you for that. So it means that on our side, yeah, we'll need to analyze a bit this and make a proposition on how to model it, and also to bring that point at European level where the discussion is happening. Good. Maybe related to the second part of the discussion about the code list for ATU, or Brecht, I know that you were quite the expert participating in those discussions. Do you want to give a word to the rest of the group about that?
Well, expert, not really, but I'm a part of the recent. I joined the work group between the GAPD, the regions, and Stadbel to define a persistent identifier that will be managed by the GAPD for the administrative units. So the different orders there are in Belgium 5. You have the level of the country, the level of the regions, the level of the provinces, the level of the arrondissements, and the level of the municipalities, and also the level of the districts. In Antwerp, we have a subdivision of the municipality. So there are different orders. 6, I think. Sorry, I said 5. It's 6 again. Each level has an upper level and a lower level unit, and now. Yeah, we are working on the description of the life cycle management. So when do we define a new identifier for a unit? When do we have a new version? which attributes are important. So the NIS code, the currently used identifier by a lot of people, is the NIS code, but in certain scenarios this isn't persistent. For example, the change in the hierarchical level. For example, in 2019, in Henegouwen of NO, there was a change in the level of the arrondissements, and each municipality which had a change of arrondissement received a new NIS code. But in fact, the municipality itself doesn't change. So the goal is to have a persistent identifier, which in this case will stay stable, and there will only be a new version with another NIS code as attribute of the identifier. So voilà. So it's a collaboration between the regions, Stadbel and the GAPD, and the goal is that everyone uses this identifier, and the GAPD will be the authentic source of these identifiers. And in time, there will be an URI to point to the objects. Now we have only the namespace. The domain will have to be decided, or will have to be created by the SPF Finance. So it's a work in progress, but there are a lot of parties around the table to discuss it. So
Thanks, Pep.
Enough. Yep.
Looking also at the comments from Anne, I thought, okay, I don't know to what extent what you will be defining is taking into consideration what exists already at European level, but I suppose you do. Basically, within the Publications Office website, they are maintaining different code lists, and some of them are actually relevant for country codes. For example, here for Belgium, they have a 3 numerical value code, which has also a specific URI, which we use this scheme. And it is also mapped directly to the ISO code that Anne referred to. But here, the one you put in the chat, Anne, is actually the subdivision code of country. Here we have the country level. And then once we go to other types of code lists, we can go to, for example, here you see for Belgium at regional or provincial level. And they have also a last one, which is NUTS. I always use the abbreviation, so I forget about it. But it's the one maintained by Eurostat and used for statistics, and where it goes one level deeper to the level of the arrondissement. So under the provinces, for example, for Oost-Vlaanderen, you see Aalst, Dendermonde, etc., etc. Couple of questions. Is this useful? And I don't know, if you know at what level of granularity the ISO code for the subdivision goes. Voilà, okay, regions and provinces.
Yeah, at least, but I saw it on a Wikipedia page on the norm, so I didn't have access to the full document yet. And yeah, the reason why I have been looking into it is because at KBR we have also, but culture is a regional competence. So very often if we want to exchange data or something, for us, sometimes it's important to know if a publisher is part of Fédération Wallonie-Bruxelles or on the other hand, Flanders. So for us, it might be interesting to add also this administrative thing. Because KBR, we're working at a federal level, but actually everything which is related to books and culture and so on is regional. So in our database, it would be useful to also make the distinction.
Yeah, and you see that within the model, there are ways of making the distinction. It's
Yeah.
not defined, but that's exactly what we need to do, is to decide to what level of detail do we go within the address or within the administrative territorial units.
But of course, if you choose a certain vocabulary for a location, then by linking information, you can also deduce it. Like, okay, Bruges,
Yeah.
Park. So I don't know to which extent you also need a code at KBR. It might be useful to introduce it.
And so, yeah, but I think it can also be made optional. That's up for discussion with the rest of the group, depending on the other domains as well and their needs. But for your side, Anne, you would need, at what level would you need to go? Regional or provincial?
For legal deposit, monitoring legal deposit, it would be enough to just have the regions.
Yeah.
Of course, if you want to do special projects, for instance, with a province or let's say city of Antwerp, or to really focus on, okay, books published in Antwerp or by Antwerp writers and so on. But I think normally the regions is sufficient just to know where to turn to. Everything which is related to Flemish literature, okay, then we have to turn to Literatuur Vlaanderen. Whereas if it concerns Fédération Wallonie-Bruxelles, then we have to contact the Ministry of Culture over there. So I think
in general, when we talk about the public organization and its, for example, jurisdiction, maybe we need to go also deeper than the region, because of course there are public organizations that have a mandate at a lower level than the region.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that? Not only you, Anne, but also the rest of the group?
Actually, that comparing to a private organization, I think for a public organization, it's really, really important to know to which governmental level they respond to.
And you mean by that the jurisdiction they have?
Yeah, and their competences and so on. Because if you're a public organization just at the level of a village, a community, a municipality, I mean, then it's of course very different. Because, yeah, even to know which legislation do I take into account, everything. Actually, yeah, for private organizations, it's the same as well. I don't know. Perhaps more qualified people want to comment on this.
Anyone who wants to add something on this?
Well, maybe a last thing for my part. If you have a choice, I would recommend to add the persistent identifier and not something like the nuts, which is an identifier which is also hierarchical, and every change, like change of in the hierarchy, will affect all the identifiers below. So that's exactly the reason, because the work group for which the work group was created on demand of Stadbel and to be compliant with the good practices, the good rules for something that is stable, identifiers who are stable and not depending on hierarchy. So I would certainly not introduce nuts or anything other, but use the authentic source identifier, which is stable, which has an attribute used by everyone, like the NIS code, which is very clear. Which municipality with the NIS code you can see this municipality belongs to this arrondissement, and this arrondissement belongs to this province, and so on. That's clear, but a little change at the second or third level, for example, will have an effect on all the sub-level units, and that's not the goal. You don't want to change everything below for a little change of on the higher level. So the goal of the persistent identifier is just to avoid this. And if you have to add something to the model, use the new ID which is created right now and not something hierarchical.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's a valid point. And then the question will be, can we make a mapping later on to urban codes that can be maintained based on changes? But I agree that if we can start with persistent URIs from Belgian level and the authoritative source, that's indeed the best. Does everyone agree with that? Can you share this in the chat? And Brecht, you mentioned the timeline.
Yeah. So we introduced the persistent ID now. So this year on the fiscal situation 2021. The URI is in development, and we have to have a domain by default
Yeah.
financing,
Yeah.
and so on. So in terms, there will be an URI for each object. But there are already data specs. So each field is described already. Right now there is only the current version, but end of this year we will publish the how would I say, the archive, the passive objects from departing from situation 2018, so before the big changes of the fusions and so on. So yeah, and there will be a document with the lifecycle management. So yeah, it's work in progress, like I said. So but the numeric park. So each unit has already its numeric identifier, but the namespace and so on will have to be added later on. So
Yeah.
voilà.
And
Yeah.
Bart, Mark, I don't know to what extent within the ICEG proposition for persistent URIs, it is mentioned somewhere that that BOSA can support with the domain definition, or I don't know. I'm really asking whether this is something that is defined, or if the idea is indeed that each responsible entity defines a specific domain or namespace.
I think that it's not defined that BOSA will play a coordinating role or central role in that. I think it's up to every organization to decide that.
Okay. Okay, good. Thanks for the answer. Good. With that, let's quickly go through also room 3 to see if there were other points. Mark, can you also help summarize the discussions you had in the third room?
Yes, we had to look first a bit where to put our post-its, so we spent a bit of time on that. It will be better in the next exercise, I think. So can you put it a bit bigger? I cannot read it. Yeah. So there were a number of discussions that already were mentioned in the discussion earlier on. So to add more levels to the organizational unit, to have a kind of recursiveness there. Also to link the address with organization rather than with the public organization. And then for the contact point, I would have expected opening days also. I don't know which one of our group put that. Perhaps he can comment, or he or she can comment on that.
Mark, yes, I think I'm the one who also add that post. Just because in the contact point, we only mentioned the opening hours. While I think that for a public organization that deliver public services, it's also important to mention the opening days. Not just assuming that the work days are valid. So that was just that point for me.
Okay.
I don't know if it makes sense for you, but it was making sense for me.
Yeah. And I think it's also related to how it is described within public service. And so probably an important point for the next webinar is to make the link between the two models really clear, and to also have a common way to describe similar things like opening hours or opening days. Yeah. Any further comments on this? In general, with the 2 points above, it's definitely related to the previous discussion we had on what should be described at organizational level, what should be described or what is specific for public organizations. And so we will integrate this as part of also of this discussion to see where we define it and what is the impact of the previous discussion we had. Good. Thanks for those comments. If there is no further comment or question, I propose that we move on. Yeah, and yeah, I see a comment in the chat. I think in general, indeed, we are talking about physical opening hours, but maybe Valerie wants to, Brice wants to clarify this, but in general, that's related to the concept of contact point. You will see in the public service model how we define it, and I think let's discuss it over there.
Yes, you're right with that, Florian. I was indeed mentioning in the context of contact point.
Yeah. Okay, good. Here, does everyone wants to take a 10 minutes break? We have sufficient time to take it. Otherwise, if no one wants to do it, of course, we can continue immediately. Yeah? But that's... +1 for the break. Okay, then we see each other around 11. Okay. Talk to you. Okie doke. I hope you had a nice coffee, tea, or water break. Can we start again? Yeah, thanks, Mark. And thanks, Brecht, for answering Svetlana's comment with the link. So yeah, I think that's also something very interesting. Let's be in touch through GitHub, Brecht, in order to include the right term in the model directly, so that we have a placeholder.
Okay.
Top. With that, I propose that we move forward with public service, and my colleague Louis will guide you through the model and also through the changes that we made. Louis?
Yes, so basically here is the overview of the model for public service. So as you can see, they have quite some change since last time. But yeah, thanks, Florian. So I will deep dive into this change. So this is the upper half of the model. So as you can see, first that we had an address class that was not here before, related to both agent class and public organization. So basically, it was mentioned during a last webinar that both public organization and agent needs an address. As you can see, also we add an agent class, which basically corresponds to a group of agents, and with this class we can describe specific types of agents, and it was mentioned during GitHub that it might be useful in the public service model to have this class. And as you can see, the agent class is a child class of agent class. So that means that every attribute that were previously defined for agent are defined as well in this model. Another changes was the link between public organization and participation class, because as mentioned in previous webinar, a public organization can be, as an example, a beneficiary of a public service, or might also play different roles. So it was really good to have this link now. Another change is that which change the cardinality of as competent authority relationship. So basically, it's if you go back a little bit to the main model, Florian, as competent, yeah, just a slide before, yeah, thank you. So as competent authority, if you can zoom a little bit. Yeah, so it's basically a link between public service and public organization. Here, thank you. And previously, the cardinality was just one. So basically, before, only one public organization can be the competent authority of a public service. But now, as mentioned in previous webinar, multiple public organization can be the head, can be responsible for a public service. Can you go back a little bit to the next slide, Florian? Thank you. And also we added a has contact point. If you just zoom close to public organization, Florian, thank you. Has contact point relationship. So basically, this relationship is a replacement for the contact point class. It directly comes from the Italian model describing public service, and it has, of course, to be discussed, but because it's quite a huge change as compared to the previous model, and we also had a GitHub issue on this one saying this was superficial. So this issue needs to be discussed, I think, during the breakout rooms that we have foreseen later on. Another big change is evidence class. So it's directly come from the CCEV diagram model. And we added multiple relationship between the evidence class and agent class. So to describe the multiple relationship that can happen between an evidence and agent. So previously we just had is about relationship, but we added as specified in the CCEV model, is created by, is provided by, and is issued by. And the evidence class is a child class of the dataset class, as you can see. And this also directly come from the CCEV model to still be compliant. And also because an evidence can be a dataset. Basically, a dataset here can be anything. It can be data, or it can be also documents. As you can see, the evidence class also had a relationship, so has supporting evidence. So if you go back, yes, thank you, Florian. So CCEV stands for Core Criterion and Core Evidence Vocabulary. It's a European standard in order to describe evidence. And so now in evidence also has a relationship between the requirement class, so has supporting evidence. So if you go back to the main model here, yeah, the model is quite huge, so we had to split it in order to describe it in a good way. So basically, now we have a relationship between evidence and requirement, so so that an evidence now can really be focused on the requirement. Now, if you go back to the next slide, Florian, I will just deep dive into the last modifications. Yeah, now the agent class is also related to the requirement class, because an agent or a group of agents can issue a requirement. So basically, it's the creator of the requirement. And it was foreseen in the CCEV model as well, still to be compliant. And finally, the last change, it was mentioned in a GitHub comment. It's the link between output and the legal framework here. So basically, as mentioned in the GitHub, the legal resource was originally just linked via the rule class to the public service class, and the legal resource describe the public service class. But as mentioned in the GitHub issue, the output of a public service is also described in the legal resource. It might be different than the legal resource that describes the public service class. So that's why, as mentioned in the GitHub issue, we added this relationship. So that's all for the upper half, the changes of the upper half of the model. Of course, if you have any questions, you can just raise a hand and I will. Okay, Mark, you have.
Yes, in the previous model we only had an agent, and now we have agent class and agent. Why was that done?
Yes, so it comes from a GitHub issue saying that we cannot really describe the type of agent before, and in this comment he said that the agent class can do it basically. And also in the previous model we couldn't really describe a group of agents. So now it's the case. So basically, a group of agents can have a participation role, can be the beneficiary of public service. Does that answer your question, Mark?
Yes, more or less, yes.
But
Thank you.
Of course, there are other ways to model that. So if you think that there is a better way, feel free also to comment to this thread on GitHub. I don't know, Louis or Christophe, if you can share the link to this thread on GitHub, and so that we can take it into account. I think that's important, and we can of course discuss that in the breakouts if you are interested about this point.
Okay.
Yeah, I just put the link to the issue on the chat. Okay. So maybe we can just go to the next slide. Yeah, so the lower half of the model. So as I mentioned, there are two relationships. If you zoom a little bit to the requirement class, the left side, thank you. So as I mentioned, we have two relationships between requirement and the upper half of the diagram, mainly agent class and evidence. So now an evidence supports requirement, as you can see here. And the requirement class here directly comes from the CCEV model, still to be requirement at the European level. And this class basically replaces the criteria requirement of the previous model. Yeah. If you go to the public service class, we just added an attribute, yes, public service class. We just added the attribute lifecycle status. So if you can recall, in the last model, we had a class called status in order to describe the lifecycle status of the public service. So the creation, it's still ongoing, and the end of a public service. And as pointed out in the previous webinar, it's not needed to have a proper attribute, a proper class, but just an attribute would be sufficient. That's why we added it. Also, there is a relationship between public service and the upper half of the diagram. Basically, there has a contact point relationship between a public service and a public organization. Yeah, still to be discussed, of course, during the breakout rooms. Now, if you go in the right side of the model, so you can see that cost has changed a little bit. Now we have a cost breakdown attribute, which is a text. Basically, it's a description of how to calculate the cost. Because as mentioned in the previous webinar, there was not really an attribute in order to really define on high level point of view how to calculate the cost. And in this case, where the cost is related to channel, since the cost highly depend on the channel side. And if you go to the last part, the last changes here, thank you. Basically, we added a few child classes of the channel class, basically offline channel, website, phone, emails, and other electronic channels, in order to be a little more specific of which channel it is. This directly comes from the Italian model of public service, and of course, it's still to be discussed. We have seen that there's an issue on GitHub saying that it might be a little overkill. Yeah, I really would like to have your point of view on this matter in the breakout rooms. Thank you. If you have any questions on the modification so far, just feel free to raise your hand, of course. Okay. If no one has question, maybe we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So as mentioned earlier, it's the same here for public service as from public organization. The changes come from two sources. First one is the previous webinar. So basically, we have added all the changes that were requested, or we have at least answered them. And from GitHub. So currently, we just have one issue that it's fully, I would say, answered. So the relationship between output and legal resource. But we still, I think we do not comply entirely with the other ones. So I would really like if you go back to GitHub issue, and if you take a look at them, and if you can give your input during the breakout session, it would be really, really great. And also maybe to the one that wrote these issues to explain them a little bit. Yeah, Florian, if you can just go to the next slide.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you. So as previously for public organization, we will now have a use case where we will use our model on a particular example. So basically here, the example we choose is to use the SDG, single digital gateway. So basically it's a European project in order to exchange evidence between member states countries. So in this case, we have an Italian citizen named Emmanuel that is moving to Belgium for work purpose. And the issue here is that he needs, of course, to provide some evidence in order to be registered in Belgium. So basically here, if we go to the first line is first line is that we have a public service which is to be registered in Belgium, and this public service has two legal frameworks related to it. So first one, of course, is the European part, so single digital gateway regulation. And since he has to move to Belgium, it's also governed by the Belgium law. And in this case, Emmanuel is Italian. He neither speak Flemish nor French. Therefore, all the service will be provided in English. And using the once only principle. So basically, the once only principle is part of the SDG, a single digital gateway, and it states that a citizen in the European Union has to provide the evidence for public service only once. So basically, in this case, if Emmanuel has provided some evidence that might be useful for a public service here in Belgium, and if he has provided this evidence in Italy, he will not need to provide them in Belgium anymore, because the Belgian counterpart will directly ask the evidence to the Italian. So we will go into that later. So basically, so Emmanuel, as I mentioned, doesn't speak any language of Belgium. Therefore, he will all the procedure will be in English. And as stated in the SDG, the Belgian authority will ask some evidence to Italy in order to fulfill his request to be registered in Belgium. So in this case, it will be first the identity of Emmanuel. Using the Belgium EDAS node. So basically, it's a common framework in the European Union in order to validate the identity of a citizen. And so any member state A can validate the identity of a citizen of a member state B, asking directly to the other member states. And once the identity is confirmed, Emmanuel has to provide some evidence, of course, to be registered in Belgium. So in this case, he has, as stated in the SDG, evidence, a list of evidence type list to fulfill the requirement as defined by the Belgium law. We have not foreseen evidence type list in the model, but we have foreseen an evidence and requirements classes in order to describe those lists. To be compliant for the model of public service, to be compliant in the SDG context. And as an example, Emmanuel needs to provide a lease agreement provided by the landlord and created by the real estate agent. So now we have multiple agents that have multiple roles in the context of the requirements and the evidence here. And the model of public service is able to describe this situation. And Emmanuel, in the SDG context, since Emmanuel has already provided his working contract to a public organization in Italy, in this case, the municipality of Milan, he don't need to provide it anymore to the Belgian government himself. The Belgium public organization would just ask the evidence to their Italian counterparts using the once-only system. And so once all the evidence is collected, Emmanuel needs to schedule an appointment to the municipality of his chosen residence. And in this case, he will just look at the opening hours of this particular public service through the website of the public organization. And at this appointment, Emmanuel brings the remaining evidence, and they will pay for the cost of the public service. After that, Emmanuel just go at home and wait for some policemen to just check that he live where he declared to live. And after that, he receive an email from the public organization and needs to schedule another appointment where he finally have his certificate. So we'll go through this example with our model. Okay, so these are the first steps of the model. So basically, you can see that you have a life event. Basically, a foreigner, in this case, Emmanuel, have to move to Belgium. And this life event is linked to the public service, deliver address certificate. Because if he move in Belgium, he needs to be registered here. And this public service, so the beneficiary of this public service here is Emmanuel, and he plays the role, of course, of the beneficiary of the service provided. This public service, so deliver address certificate, is grounded of two legal resources, so as mentioned before. The first one is the Belgian Civil Code, and the second one is a single digital gateway regulation. Of course, if you have any question about the example or the model, feel free to raise your hand. Okay. Can you go to the next slide, Florian? Thank you. So here, Emmanuel needs to provide an evidence, namely the lease agreement. So basically, the Emmanuel still plays the role of the beneficiary, as you can see on the left side of the diagram, and is related via the has participation relationship to the public service deliver address certificate. And this public service has a requirement, so in this case, having a Belgium address. And in order to fulfill this requirement, he has a supporting evidence. And the evidence here is a lease agreement. And now you can see here that multiple agents has a different role in delivering this evidence. So here we have Emmanuel, which is directly concerned by the lease agreement, but this lease agreement is provided by the landlord of Emmanuel, in this case, John Doe, which is as a role of the evidence provider in this context. But it's not, in this case, in this example, it's not directly the landlord that created the lease agreement, but it's the real estate agent. So that's why we added another stakeholder, which is John Dupuis, which is the real estate agent and created the lease agreement. And therefore, the participation of John Dupuis is the evidence creator, which is necessary to run the service. Okay, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. So here is where the magic happened, I would say, in the SDG context. So as you can see, there is not that much difference between the last slide in the name of evidence. The only thing that changed is the country of the evidence, namely Italy here. So basically here, you can see that the ones only in the SDG context, the Belgium counterparts can have an evidence that comes from another country, namely Italy here. And this evidence is related to another public service, which is to have documents delivered from another country using the SDG regulation from the European Union. So here, since Emmanuel has provided its working contract to the municipality of Milan, he should be able to receive it in Belgium. Okay, can you go to the next slide? Okay, here. So Emmanuel still needs to schedule an appointment with the public organization. So if you go to the left side, you have an agent who still has a beneficiary role in the public service. In this case, it's still deliver address certificates. And in order to do that, he needs first to look at the website of the municipality of Odogame. Website is a direct subclass of channel, therefore there is a has channel relationship between public service and a website. After that, he just look via the website at another channel, which is an offline channel. In this case, if you go to the right side, so the service bureau of the public service, and this offline channel might have some opening hour specification, namely the agent might have holidays, therefore this particular channel is not open during holiday periods. So seeing that, Emmanuel scheduled an appointment, and at this appointment to the public organization, so here the municipality of Odegem, which has an offline channel. So offline channel service bureau is owned by the public organization, and this public organization has a direct role in the public service, which is to be the service provider. Therefore, when Emmanuel's come to the service, he will provide all the evidence he gathered so far and pay the cost, which is, as an example, €10 to deliver the address certificate. Okay. So if you go to the next slide, Florian, thank you. And after that, Emmanuel needs to receive the certificate after the public service checked that he lived where he declared. So basically, in this case, we have the public service at the center, and still Emmanuel, which is the beneficiary of the public service, and receives as an output the address certificate. So this is the end of the use case. Do you have any question on it? Yes, Bernard.
Okay, I have one question for this slide and one for the former one. So why is there no relationship between the output and the agent? Because the certificate, the address certificate, somehow relates to the agent and could be used, for example, as evidence for other services, and so the output is not unrelated to the agent. So is it like something that is simpler and the relationship has not been represented in this view, or is it in the model that there is no relationship between output and agent? I don't have the model on the full model view on my eyes right now. So
it's
Yes.
not part of the full model. Louis, go ahead.
No. So I was going to say the same thing.
okay, and in the former slide, if you can put it back, why is there no relationship between the offline channel on the right side of the screen and the public service? Because there should be a has channel relationship.
Yes, indeed. It
Okay.
was just for the sake of simplification of the slide, but indeed
Perfect.
it's
Thank
has
you.
been foreseen.
That's all.
Thanks. Svetlana?
Yeah, I have a small question just for better understanding. Why do we call Emmanuel an agent and not a person?
An agent can be multiple thing, because we can also have a company that is the beneficiary of a public service, and therefore in this case it's just it's not a person, it's something else, and we describe I would say all entity that might be the beneficiary of a public service as the term agent.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I have a small question about the example itself. Why would you need an employment contract to get an address certificate? There is free movement of persons in Europe, I think. So why? Well, I could go and live in Italy. I don't have to prove that I have that I work there or that I'm working.
Yes.
Yeah, just a question like that.
And honestly, I don't have the answer, I would say, but it's in the Belgium process. So I would say, as a French person who moved recently into Belgium, I had to provide my working contract in order to be registered in Belgium.
So does that mean that somebody, a Frenchman that doesn't have that is not working, that he cannot move to Belgium?
That's a good question, Mark. And actually, I would be interested in knowing the exact answer to that. Like in the case of Louis, if he hadn't provided his working contract copy, could he have still get his address, his residence address changed? I don't know. But also for the sake of the example,
Yeah,
it was
okay.
useful to have it to indicate why it's interesting to have the link with the SDG context.
Okay.
But yeah, in general, for the concrete answer at Belgian level, I don't know.
If I can add something to this, there was a question earlier on around the agent class insertion in the model and the justification of it. I was the one asking for it, and in this case, it could be useful to explain why the process is different whether you are a Belgian citizen or a foreign citizen, because this is not addressed in the agent class alone. The agent class alone is agent class. Okay, so you need to provide a profile of a general, not a particular person, but a category of people, in order to say, okay, for this category of people, if you are, for example, if you are under 26, you have special prices for train, or if you are a foreigner, you have to provide to fulfill another process in order to have the same benefit as a national. So this can be an illustration of the need for that insertion in the model.
Yeah, and let's tackle briefly this one, and then I propose that we move to the breakout rooms so that we discuss further in smaller groups different change requests or elements that we could improve in the model. For this, one important question, I agree with the use case, the need you described, Bernard. The question is more, do we need a separate class, the agent class, to tackle this, or could it be only an attribute under the agent class, the DCT agent that we have on the screen?
Well, actually, the limitation I have with agent is that it only describes an actual actor. So it's company X or it's person Y. And it doesn't match all the use cases. If the use case is you communicate, you inform the general public about public service, you need to answer the question, who is this for? And it's not, the answer is not for person X or person Y, because you cannot name them all. You have to have some kind of generalization. So I don't have a solution, a best solution as to how to address that in the model. But I have understood that agent is not sufficient for that, because it's an identified person or company or whatever, and not a category or an abstraction. So is it clear?
I see what you mean. Maybe we need to deep dive into it further so that we know exactly how to model it later on. But either we do that in breakouts or after this webinar. Both are possible. Yeah, but it's definitely something we need to discuss further and analyze a bit further before taking a decision with the rest of the group, I think. With that, I propose that we move to the breakouts. Yeah.
Maybe a question, Florian. Will we have enough time to do that? We have only 20 minutes left, and well.
Yeah, it's a valid point. Or we can continue with the entire group and discuss the specific parts of the models of the model. Yeah. So yeah, okay. Let's continue the discussions with the entire group. So let me put back the full model. Is it big enough for you to read? I guess not.
Not really.
Not really. But in general, are there other comments about the model? And then I can move to the right place.
I think, well, to come back on the agent and agent class topic, the terminology agent class is a bit confusing, because everything the boxes here are all classes, and you have then agent and agent class. It's a bit confusing, I think. We should perhaps try to find a better name. I know it's a DCT name that is there, but it's a bit confusing for me.
Yeah. And we can use a different name and still point to the DCT agent class if it makes sense. Huh? But yeah, point taken. And which name would you see for that, Bernard, Marc, others?
I would suggest profile or agent profile or something like that.
Yeah, I see Olivier agrees. Other inputs? So do you agree with profile? Agent profile, maybe? Yeah.
While thinking about it, I also came across the possible relationship between that notion and the conditions. Okay, if you need to be a national in order to benefit whatever, or you need to be over 18 to vote or whatever. It's both a profile description, and we need it to address certain use cases. It's also a condition in some cases. So depending on the use cases and on the balance between all the use cases, this is a discussion that could also be held.
Yeah. Is it something that you could describe further on GitHub or share with us some extra examples and use cases via email?
Yeah, I haven't really thought a little bit further about it, but I can do it.
Yeah, no worries. Huh? It's not in the coming day. Huh? I know you are also going on holiday, so good. So that's for agent and agent profile.
Perhaps another comment on that is agent then really a subclass of agent profile?
I would say no. If we describe it as agent profile, it's more, it should have a group, but it's more a way of grouping agents.
Okay.
You agree?
Yes.
No.
Yes, I agree too.
And probably the connections that we have above with that capture the different roles or activities that someone, an agent can have with evidence should be directly linked to agent and not to the agent class anymore.
Can we come back on the output?
Yeah.
I don't know if it's. I have the feeling that when I see there only produces output, that I miss consumes output, because I think it's often the case. I think that you still have enough public services that even consumes their own output.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so that it's yeah, a bilateral connection between output and service.
In my eyes, yes, in my opinion. Yeah.
Do the others agree with that? So to include consumes as sorry, I don't find back the name, as the opposite direction as produces. If you agree, maybe you can simply indicate it in the chat. Yeah, thanks. Good. Other inputs? Maybe on the contact point side, let me show it. So we have now the link between public service and public organization. So the public service defines a specific contact point through this relationship, and this makes use of also the channel types that we have defined here under that are also connected to the organization, the public organization, with the relationships over here.
Perhaps also a comment here. We had a discussion on public organizations and private organizations. You could have a similar kind of discussion with public services and then private services.
Yes, that's true. So you mean that you would see all those elements also defined as part of a service, and then define what is specific for public service? That's what you mean?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. My 2 cents would be that we need to also assess what is possible within the timeline we have in the coming 2-3 months. But definitely, this is something that we need to keep in mind. And let's see if we can easily make a distinction between what is common for services and what is specific for public service. Yeah. Good. I don't know, Louis, Christophe, if you have other questions.
Not on my side.
Not on my side.
Okay, but then for everyone, don't hesitate to. So after the webinar, we will of course publish a new version online. Please go through it and share your comments on GitHub. But let's wrap up for today. Me jump to next steps. So yeah, as I was mentioning, we will of course share with you the notes of the webinar of today, together with the recording, etc. Everything will be shared through GitHub. We can send you a brief email once available. And yeah, what we expect from you is of course to go through the meeting report and come back to us if you have questions, extra comments. You can, of course, do that via email, but if it's really about new issues, etc., it's even better if you do it directly via GitHub. And in the meanwhile, we'll also update the models based on the discussions, or start the analysis of what is common to more generic concepts such as organizations or service, and what is specific for the models we are trying to define here. And see how we can, basically what we can tackle within the time frame we have. And then we'll also share that through GitHub so that you can review it before our next webinar, which will take place on the 9th of September. So if you haven't registered yet for this one and you would like to participate, please do so. We shared the link a couple of times. It's also available for registering. It's also available through GitHub. And do mind that we only send the invitation to the people who registered to avoid contacting a very broad group of people that are not willing to participate in all webinars. So it is important to register yourself. And as always, if you have specific use cases, examples that you would like us to look at for the next webinars, please contact us about this. I don't know if there are other questions. No. Then it would be also interesting, and if you don't have it immediately, you can also be shared via email. If you have specific feedback about the way we organize the discussions, about the iterative approach, feel free to share it with us, because of course we are also willing to improve the way we interact. Yeah, besides that, we would like really to thank you for all the participation in the comments shared today. It was still quite intensive with all the examples and specific detailed questions and comments. So yeah, thanks for participating, and I wish you a very pleasant lunch and yeah, end of the week. And we'll be in touch in the coming days and weeks. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye.